We are in the midst of a sermon series that we have titled Slow Down for Summer. Today I want to invite you to Sabbath, to rest. To Sabbath from something stressful, to simply stop doing and just be. But wait, you might ask, didn't we just hear a reading where Jesus and his disciples violate Sabbath? In our gospel reading today, Jesus and his disciples are walking through a field on the Sabbath day. This Sabbath day was a day to remember that after 6 days of creation, even God rested. That when the Hebrews cried out under slavery in Egypt, God delivered them rest. That all God's creation, from the ground itself every 6 years to animals to, yes, human beings stuck in late-stage capitalism, deserve rest. Most importantly, on the Sabbath, no work was to be done. But here the disciples are, feeling a little nibbly, wandering through the field and plucking the grain to eat as a snack. And then the Pharisees come along. The Pharisees, who are the biblical equivalent of the dudes who pop up in the comments to tell you what you're doing wrong or that you shouldn't be doing it at all. Here they pop up saying, "Why are you doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath?" And Jesus claps back with some examples from the Bible that they misunderstand. He ends by insisting that he is the Son of Man, the Lord of the Sabbath. The Sabbath was made for him. And so there are a lot of stories like this one about Sabbath in our Bible. And it does lead to some confusion. Is Jesus saying we should or should not practice Sabbath? I don't think he's ruling it out entirely. I think he is love incarnate and Lord of the Sabbath, so he is saying that the Sabbath should always be in service of love. In other words, he is moving us from a legal mindset to a love mindset. In a legal mindset, God is there to set rules and punish people for breaking them. God is loving, but only as loving as the rules allow for. God is law and order first and love second. But in a love mindset, it's love and then rules. God is love, and God's rules are only there to help you be loving. But if a rule gets in the way of love, then the rule gets tossed aside, not the love. And love here is not a romantic feeling. It is not a general feeling of goodwill towards all folks, but the kind of saving solidarity that we see in Jesus Christ, born among us to share our sufferings and to free us from the bondage that ails us. Think of it this way. We teach kids manners. We teach them to say please and thank you. I know when I was coming up, if I didn't say please, my mother would say, "What's the magic word?" This is a good thing. But imagine that your child comes into the house from playing in the backyard and they're just bleeding profusely and they ask you for a bandage. Do you stop in that moment saying, "What's the magic word?" Or do you just run and get them a bandage and worry about that particular rule at a later date? Your love and your care come first, and it is not a permissive kind of love, but a saving kind of love. I think this helps us understand not only the Sabbath, but a lot of what Jesus says about laws and rules and practices. Instead of making them first, he wants us to make them second to love. And he shows us in his life, his death, his teachings, his resurrection, what the nature of that love really is. A lot of the fights about Sabbath are still stuck in this legal mindset. It's always a fight over what the right day of the week is, or what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, and what the punishment is if you break one of those rules. Sabbath can be one of the most controversial topics out there, dividing entire religions, dividing entire denominations. In our church, we don't tend to talk about practices like Sabbath as a rule you must follow. We don't think you have to follow rules at all in order to earn God's love or escape God's punishment. You are so completely loved already, there is nothing you can do to add or subtract from that. And we believe that God punishes us only by opening our eyes through God's love to all that we have done wrong to others. Instead, we think Jesus invites us to follow in this way of Jesus, this set of practices for incarnating, for making real the beloved dream that God has for what our life together might look like. And this week I was reflecting on all this, and I realized that, you know what else feels stuck in a legal mindset in our contemporary conversation? Is this entire topic of self-care. I like self-care. I think you should all take care of yourselves. But self-care has been cast almost as this extra activity you have to do that is now packaged and sold to you on Instagram. It's not resting, it's another form of doing, and your punishment for not doing it right is you burn out. Today we have this economy where you can work more than full time, and that is no guarantee that you will have medicine, food, and a roof over your head. We expect today people to do by themselves or by paying for it what we used to have entire villages to do for most of human history. But if you're tired all the time, if you are exhausted, it's not because our society has chosen consumerism over community. No. It's because you are just not doing enough self-care. You're punished for not doing on top of all the doing you're already supposed to do. And what's crazy to me is that in this, we have accidentally reinvented one of the things that led to the Great Reformation. Minor history note here, the reformers criticized the church of their day for having one set of rules for the general everyday folks and another set of rules for the special folks, the clergy, the priests, the monks, the nuns. But capitalism has created that all over again. Now there are well-off folks who should and must take time off for self-care. And then there are the working poor majority who folks call lazy if they sit down to rest. If you are sufficiently high up these days in the priesthood of Mammon, it is your right and your responsibility to practice self-care. But for the rest of y'all, you just need to get back to work. So I've just decided that the way we talk about self-care has gotten off track. Self-care can include Sabbath. Self-care can include stopping, but Sabbath itself is not self-care. Because Sabbath is not biblically an additional thing you do, or it's your fault if you're tired. The simplest form of Sabbath is just stopping. Just not doing something, pausing, resting, opting out. Sabbath is opting out of these fallen systems of exploitation. It is resistance to all of that pressure. Sabbath is not saying to Pharaoh in Egypt, hey, can I get 5 minutes for some human connection, then I'll get right back to making some bricks? It's saying, no, peace, I'm out, we're following this dude to the promised land. That's Sabbath. And so we have to ask ourselves, what does Sabbath look like from a love mindset in today's world? Well, it cannot be a rule that we have to follow or else we're going to be punished or blamed for all of our problems, right? It also has to look different for everyone. One person's idea of rest looks like another person's activity. One person needs to stop working and pick up a hobby, and that's their form of rest. Another person needs to give up their hobby because they're driving themselves wild trying to get it done. I can't tell you how to rest this morning, but I am here to tell you that you deserve rest. You need to first ask, what you need, what is pulling you apart at the seams, what is making you fray. And then ask, how could I Sabbath from this, whether it's for 5 minutes or for 50 days? And look, I get it, your landlord is not going to accept, hey, I'm Sabbathing on rent this month. Your Child Protective Services is not going to accept, I'm Sabbathing on parenting this month, right? The grind is real, the hustle is real, especially for parents. But I also know, because I know y'all and I love y'all, some of y'all are your worst enemies, your own worst enemies. Some of y'all are letting Pharaoh live rent-free in your own heads. Telling yourself that you need to keep running, grinding, hustling, working all the time. And the funny thing about rest is that you will actually get more done if you stop to rest once in a while than you would if you just did the grind over and over and over again, despite what your brain tells you. Runners talk about run slow to run fast. Slow your pace down deliberately so that you don't hurt yourself, so that you can run more, and then in the long run you get faster. Take a rest day. Or someone in our congregation, I won't name names, shared with me that she was working on a problem at work, and she was working nights and weekends and just going crazy and burning the candle at both ends, going to the absolute limit, and was just going to burn out, just was done with it all. And decided to take a break, scale back to sort of a normal, reasonable, manageable work hours, and suddenly made more progress on that problem when they did that than she did in all those hours pushing herself to the limit. So this week, let yourself rest and think about where you can rest. Not because it's a rule, but because it's what God wants for you. You can Sabbath by, please, getting off your phone or detaching from it so that we're not just plugged into this constant grind of responding instantly to every single thing that comes our way. You could Sabbath by saying yes to less stuff, to Sabbath by worrying about less stuff and trusting God, by maybe setting more realistic expectations for yourself. Maybe you're Sabbathing by saying the house is just not getting deep cleaned this month. Maybe the kids are getting Lunchables today, and I'm going to Sabbath from caring what Susan at school or my mother-in-law thinks about that. That's okay. You can pause things even when they're beautiful and worthwhile, and you would otherwise want to do them because you just need a break. So our 40s and under book group is taking a break until August 13th. We're just putting it on pause for summer. The Run for Tacos will not meet in July, putting it on pause. I think those things are great. I would love lots of people to join in. I'm going to keep doing them. I would love them to be huge groups. I would love folks to be there. They're beautiful, they're worthwhile, but they need a rest. For some folks, especially if you were brought up saying you have to be at church on every Sunday, maybe rest looks like not coming to church for a week or two. I know I'm going to regret that next week when there's like 3 people here. Like 3 of you, and I'm just going to pretend that there's people in the back preaching too. But I'm going to say it anyway, because if you feel like you have to, or God's going to be mad at you, or other people are going to judge you, then that's not why you're supposed to be here, right? For others, I hope that church becomes a place of rest, a place to rest, because how many times and spaces in this world do we get where nothing is expected of us? You don't have to buy a drink to be able to sit in the pews, right? You don't have to pay for something. You don't have to buy a ticket. You aren't being asked to do something or engage in some activity, or you don't have to pay for it. You aren't going to be judged. All you have to do for 1 hour on Sundays is be. Sit and breathe. Not do, just be. And that is Sabbath. That is how we Sabbath together. And the more we commit to community, the more we Sabbath together as a community, the more space it opens up for rest for all of us. Because Sabbathing together means that, yeah, we actually can take turns resting. Maybe someone steps up and takes the lead on a project this time so that other folks don't need to, lose their mind over it, right? Maybe you have somebody you could ask for help. I know that's the worst thing in the world for some of y'all, but there are people who would be willing to be helpful. Maybe for a little bit, you do some more work so that other folks can have a rest. Okay, parents are already familiar with this idea during the summer season, right? Which is not very restful. But recall that our Exodus passage talked about letting the ground lie fallow and not harvesting so that the poor of the land could eat. Sabbath was never meant to be a rule. It was always meant to be a reminder of our inextricable links to each other, of our communal well-being, of our duty to care for each other, not by doing, but sometimes by resting. We need that communal perspective on Sabbath, or else it just becomes another tool for separating the haves and the have-nots. So today as you go, I want you to know that you were not made for productivity. You were not put on this earth by your Creator to grind yourself to dust or burn yourself up. You do not have to earn rest. You do not have to prove yourself such a good worker because you're a woman or gay or trans, and folks are going to look at you some kind of way if you don't exceed all their expectations. You are not here to work alone. Rest is not a prize that you earn for winning at capitalism. Rest is resistance. Rest is resistance against all of the death-dealing powers that be that say that the world will think less of you if you don't burn yourself out. It is resistance against sin and death itself. It is embracing exactly what God created us to do. You were made for rest. So as you go today, before we sing, take a moment with me and just breathe. Close your eyes if you're comfortable. If you're sitting at home, find a comfortable point on the couch and just breathe. Because right now your calling is not to do anything. It's just to be. During this summer of talking about slowing down, I have added breath prayers to your bulletin for each week. And this is the go-to recommendation that I always have, because no matter where you are or what you are doing and how little you could actually physically rest or stop working, you can always find God in prayer. You will always be breathing, and you can always pray. You can make every breath itself a prayer, and when you do that, you will discover the rest that God has for you. In the passage just before today's in Matthew, Jesus says, "Come to me, all who are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest." With each inhale and each exhale, you can remember that rest is not something you need to earn. It is what you were made for. So now, together, let us sing.